All right, so in this video, I am going to show you how to do some basic photo editing in Pixlr E. So you can see on my screen here that I am at Pixlr.com, and from there I'm not going to sign up or log in. I'm not going to tell you you have to do it. Try premium. You have to pay for that, otherwise we get ads. But I'm just going to come down here, Pixlr E. You can see it calls itself an advanced photo editor ish. We don't want Pixlr X. It doesn't have the kind of tools that we really want. So here we are. We're going to click here on Start a Photo Editing Project. And this takes us to the place where we can open an image. So this is going to assume you've already put photographs on your computer. This is on a computer. This by nature goes to a place where I have gotten photographs before from Pixlr, and I'm just going to choose, oh, I like this one. All right, so I'm just going to choose an image, and the next thing I'm going to do before I go too far is it's giving me choices on the size of my image. So it says the image I've selected is very large, 4,000 by 3,000 pixels. I actually want to keep the very largest image that I can, because of the fact that if I want to print this at some point in time, I want the largest image. I suppose if you know that you're not going to ever print it, you could go with this full HD size. We're down to, this tells us the size of our image in pixels. This is a little smaller, a little too small for my tastes. If I'm talking to my students, I don't want you to go below the full HD. If you're somebody out in the world, you can do what you like, but I prefer this largest size because that gives me more options later. And then I'm going to hit apply. So now I have my image in Pixlr. I have the wonderful little ads over here that I can't get rid of, but oh well, this is how I get a free photo editing software. This is how you get it. And so the very first thing that I would look at with my photograph is I would look at the cropping of it, and especially so if I want to think about what was I looking at when I took this photograph. And I would especially look at the edges, and like I really like here how the ear of this bunny comes really close, and these ears are all close, and we have the body close here. I'm not super fond of that little thing in the corner there. That's a little distracting to me. So I think I do want to crop this image. And for that, I'm going to come over to the crop tool here. You can see it shows up and tells you what it is. If I hover, I click, and now I have this boundary where I can do all kinds of things. Right now, it still tells me my pixels, my height, and my width, and my height. I can straighten it here if I want to rotate. Here, if I click here, the slider, and so if my say like I had a horizon and it wasn't straight, this is how I could do it, and I could slide it either way. I don't want to do that in this case, but that's where we straighten. You do need to make sure your horizons are straight, vertical things. So this isn't a free like I can make any what we call aspect ratio. And so when we talk about aspect ratios, we're talking about the width compared to the height. You could see over here now it's made these numbers the same, and I have a square. This is a square. I'd have to have a really good reason to want to do this. And you can see if I bring my cursor in here and I get the 4 arrows, now I can kind of move this around. I could decide that this is something I wanted to do, but I actually really like that things are there. So I'm not going to do that, but I am going to go to this preset up in the right hand corner, and I'm missing some things because of those darn ads. But if I click here where it says none, then I get these different options. So I can choose my original aspect ratio, which is the way my camera shot it. And when I take a corner now, no matter what I do, it keeps that aspect ratio, which I kind of like. But there are some other options, like a monitor size, a widescreen size. There's just so many. You can see 3:2, so all of these numbers are the ratio of the width to the height, and you can see that my original was 4:3. But say I wanted to make it like a 35mm camera kind of film, and because I knew I wanted to take this off, that's kind of an option. I'm not so sure how I feel about taking away Bunny's paws right there, so I'm going to try to go back to my original and see if I can just take out that little tiny corner that's bugging me. I'm looking at the edge here, and I'm going to see if I can just scooch this over a smidge so that now I've really not taken out a whole lot. I'm looking at this edge here and this edge over here, and I want to kind of balance those two out while not including that little funky thing down there. So I think this is a really good option. At this point, I would like to hit an apply button, but it's not here until I go to free, and then it put it back. If I did it this way, so I could scooch it up a little bit and scooch it up here. But this is kind of irritating to do it this way. And so now I'm going to come back to my ratio, and I made things harder on myself to show you the different options. So I'm bringing this in here. I'm kind of scooching this back over where I liked it. So if I'm in this mode here, I have to actually hit my enter button on my keyboard, and now I have gotten the cropping effect that I want. So that's just the cropping part. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to address our exposure. So that's how light and dark our images, and I'm also going to talk about contrast. So all of this is going to be in adjustments up here. And so there's a couple of different ways to make adjustments to our image. Exposure here isn't quite like exposure in our camera, and I'm just going to move this over here. It is affecting primarily the highlights in my image, not so much the shadow tones. It does somewhat, and in general, I'm not going to use this, but I do want to show you what this looks like. So I'm just going to hit cancel, and the adjustment I'm going to suggest for my students, there's a couple in here. So first is brightness and contrast. Brightness affects the overall, like all of the tones in the image, pretty much the same. So that's what this one does. I'm going to suggest that you kind of play with things and get an idea. It's like, obviously this is way too bright, and the same goes here. We don't want to be too dark. So I might say I want just a little bit more brightness, but I also want contrast. So the difference between the darks and the lights, if we push our contrast a little bit, it will make our brights a little bit brighter, our darks a little bit darker, and more variation of the tones in between. And this is generally a good thing. A lot of times images are not quite as snappy as we would like. We want something that really gets our attention. And you can see these are really small, minor changes. Most of the time with a well-exposed image, you're not going to need a lot of really big changes, edits. So I'm going to say hit apply at this point, and then I want to show you another adjustment that can be very, very helpful: highlights and shadows. So sometimes we get to an image and we've got it the way we want, but then like we've got our highlights here just a little too bright, and so I can affect that here. So if I need just a little bit less brightness in my, I just hit shadows for some reason. No wonder it wasn't looking right. So my highlights, now I can see that gets a little bit more detail in. So this is how I can kind of adjust specifically just my highlights, and I can do the same thing with my shadows. If you look at the shadows, the darker points here, I usually want just a little bit of detail in there. I want some blacks that are really black, but I want to be able to see a little bit of detail. I don't want this whole area to be a big black hole. Like if I push this over here and now I can't see anything. Though now that I said that, in this particular image, pushing those shadows back brought the attention here. So this is where sometimes it's a judgment call, yeah? So this isn't bad. I'm going to say a little bit. Oops, I just accidentally pushed it way over. Though that's an interesting interpretation of that image. So I'm just going to kind of pull that there. There is some personal taste in this, but our general rule is we want to have some highlights with some details in them, some shadows with some details. We can also have some things that we call spectral highlights or spectral shadows, where we don't really have a lot of detail in them. But they can't be too, if there's too many of those, it's very distracting. But here's our apply button. And so we've affected the tonal values, the lights and the darks in this image. The next thing that we want to consider and look at is in our adjustments. We want to look at what's called here in Pixlr a temperature and tint. So this is talking about our light temperature, color temperature, white balance, all the same words, different words for the same thing. And so this is where we can see that temperature, the warm light versus the cool light. Most of the time, your auto white balance is going to be pretty good for you. And so if you're going to do any changes here, I would again keep them very minor. You know, sometimes a warmer feeling kind of gives you the feel you like, or the cooler. We're really looking for what we call a neutral. So we want it to feel natural. Really is what we're looking for here. And so most of the time leaving these zeroed will be the best thing. But if you feel like there's a problem with the color, like it feels too yellow, or it feels too blue, or feels too green or pink, or for whatever reason, this is the place to fix that. So since I don't really want to change anything, I'm going to hit cancel, but I wanted you to see those options. And then the next adjustment would be in our saturation. This, we want to go to hue and saturation. I'll explain what hue is. It actually takes all of those colors and shifts them. So this is how we would like colorize things. If you're one of my students, don't do this. We want to keep everything as natural and clean as possible. So I don't want you to mess with hue for assignments. The same generally goes for lightness. So this is the tonal value of the colors, similar to brightness. In general, you shouldn't be messing with this. I will say saturation is one of those things that you can do. My students need to keep these adjustments to the minimum. So sometimes my personal preference is I do like to just push saturation a little bit, just to kind of emphasize. And this image I chose doesn't have a lot of color. This is also, if you were going to want a black and white, this is how you would completely desaturate the image, take all of the color out. But we'll just go ahead, and I like, my particular tastes are just a lot of times slightly saturated, a little bit on the plus side, but you could even go a little bit on the minus side. This is one of those things where it kind of depends on your personal preference. But my students need to keep these minimal. I'm going to hit apply. And then finally, when it comes to, actually I'm going to show you one more thing before I get to final things. Vibrance. This is similar to saturation, but it applies only to the more subtle colors, the weaker colors. So I'm just going to see what this does if I push this way over. And that's kind of an interesting thing. You can see it's kind of feels like it's warming things up a lot. So there's probably a lot of warm colors, a lot of yellows in this image. Not a bad thing. So, but I'm kind of liking the neutral, more neutral feel to this. So I'm just going to hit cancel. I'm not going to play with Vibrance, but you can see there's a more subtle difference there. All right. At this point, you can look at things like your overall tonal values. Like if I have something bright on my edges, that can be kind of a distracting thing, leading the viewer out. And this is one of the things where then I would say it might be okay to do a little bit of vignetting. Vignettes are one of those things that I find very useful as a minimal tool. So for a vignette here in Pixlr E, sorry, filter and vignette, and you can see I'm just going to show you extreme. So this is an extreme vignette. This is not something I'm going to say my students should do. I prefer more subtle kinds of things. So it just pulls that down a little bit, so it's not an obvious thing. If you're curious, an opposite vignette is lightening on all the areas, on all the edges. There are some reasons to do it, but in general, a kind of a standard kind of thing. I might, and you again can see it's a very subtle thing, but it just pulls down that edge enough where it's darker everywhere else. It doesn't do a whole lot. And now I don't have brighter things here that are distracting. So I'm just going to hit apply. The very last thing, well, this over here is the dodge and burn tool. In Pixlr especially, it is a difficult tool to control without so that it doesn't look weird. I would say I would definitely give my students the advice to stay away from this. If you're in another program and you can make dodging and burning work, that's okay. So dodging and burning is like taking just a selective, like this says, lightening or darkening the areas of the image to bring out dark areas or dim light ones. So it's a very selective tool to, like, say I really wanted to bring just this down a little bit. I would say better, if I feel like that's a problem, to go into my highlights and my shadows and to go to my highlights and pull them down a little bit. That's a better, because if I've got one highlight, probably I have others. So in this program, that's how I would deal with those kinds of things in a better way. So finally, I'm done with my image. What do I want to do? I want to save this to my computer. So I'm going to come over here on File, and I am going to export. And I don't want a PNG because that I'm not fond of those. So export template, and that's not what I wanted. My bad. Save. That's what I wanted to do. I'm sorry. And so now I'm going to save it as a JPEG, high quality. This tells me where my pixels are. And I should be able to save it as, I can also save it PNG, but JPEG is recommended because they're small and mighty, and a lot of times I'll just push my all the way up to this size. And where is my apply document? Oh, no, image. Great. I love how they change things on me all the time. High quality. Let's see what enter does. Oh, save as. There. This is the problem, is that the save as button, because that's what I really want. So this is the number. It looks like it was giving it a number 2 to save it different. I'm gonna actually give this guy a name, Rabbits Edit, so that when I'm looking in my file I can find it. And now I hit apply, and now I get more ads. Ever so fabulous. And it was saved to my computer, and I am assuming that that went into my download folder. Indeed, that is where it went. So later I would take that and move it, because I don't want that to stay there. But that gives you a basic idea, I don't need this window here, of how to do editing in Pixlr X to get an image just to look as good as it possibly can.